Hey, welcome everybody. We're so glad to have you here tonight. Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting parents whose children have passed. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. HPH goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non dogmatic way. HPH affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at this meeting is voluntary. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Discussions here are confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members. So we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. So welcome, Sally, and thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Lynn. Well, Sally, we are really excited and honored to have you with us today. Let me read Sally's bio. When Sally's 21-year-old son died in a boat accident, her greatest fear is realized. Christopher was often drawn to risk and struggled with addiction. In this riveting memoir, Sally captures the wild ride of his jam packed life and her deep love for him while reflecting on her own childhood and family legacy of alcoholism. Sally shares insights about what it's like to experience the emotional aftershocks of acute grief, filtered through the dual lens of her personal experience as a mother and her professional vantage point as a psychotherapist. Even if they have not been touched by loss in this way, readers may see themselves in Sally's bittersweet illusion of trying to keep her wild child safe, in how she is challenged to let go of her fear, guilt, and regret in order to forgive herself, and in the way grief teaches her about the power of love. Sally McQuillen, LCSW, CADC, is a psychotherapist in private practice, specializing in addiction recovery, grief, and trauma healing. An avid reader with a double major in writing and dance criticism in college, she began working in public relations and marketing prior to obtaining her master's degree in social work. Reaching for Beautiful is Sally's first book. She and her husband live on the North Shore of Chicago, where they have raised their 3 children. So, Sally, I'd love to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your son, Christopher. I have found that regardless of how our kids passed or how they live their life, they share they seem to all be very evolved souls. So can you tell us a little bit about your beautiful son?
It would be my pleasure, and it's so good to be with all of you. I loved listening to the mission statement of helping parents heal, and I do feel as if I want to speak to getting to a place of being in a shining light. I love that to become a shining light parent, and Christopher was and is a shining light. Just an incredible, powerful, wild, beautiful spirit, if I do say so myself. Um, and he had me from the very beginning out over my skis. I was incredibly challenged by his momentum. He was running at 9 months, and he was often hard for me to have any semblance of control over throughout the course of his life. And retrospectively, I'm not sure I really should have wanted to.
Well, thank you for that. And I feel like so many of these kids are like that. They want to live life because I think that there's a knowing. I think that they they just want to take it all in, because I believe that their soul, a part of their soul knows that they're here for a short time. Do you think that Christopher, do you feel like, did he ever say anything? Did he ever indicate that he knew that maybe his time here was brief? And what about you? Did you ever have that knowing?
I think that I had that knowing from the very beginning. It's hard to suss out how much of it was just related to the fact that I was sort of naturally fearful anyway. And but certainly when he did pass, I and he'd had three near-death accidents even before he passed. So it was certainly something I'd feared and something that I intuitively sensed, I think, throughout his life. And I believe he did too. We said about him early that he was an old soul. And I don't know anyone else who lived so purely in the moment. There was not even a second of anticipation of what would come next.
Thank you for that. And the title, "The Reaching for Beautiful," is just so wonderful and beautiful. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about what inspired that title? Maybe a little bit about that.
Yes, every morning when I wake up, it's now been 9 years since his passing at the age of 21. And every morning he is the first person I think about. And I actually will literally reach for a picture that I have of him that's next to the bed. But this whole idea of reaching for beautiful goes much deeper than simply reaching to connect with his beauty. And it's more about my healing process, all of the different ways that I have consciously been aspiring to choose to see the beauty instead of the pain.
Oh, I love that, because I agree. That's what we talk about. Elizabeth always has said, ever since that movie came out, let's find the collateral beauty, because we can't change what has happened. So, find the beautiful in it. And there are, there's some, no fear of death. To me, that that in itself is beautiful. So I thought that just, I read your book, I loved it, and I just felt like that title was just beautiful. I just really enjoyed it. Now, writing your book, I mean, journaling is so helpful for so many. I know that early on, I just journaled. I wrote my son letters. So, did you start to journal? Is that what kind of took you to the next step in writing your book? Or why don't you tell us about how writing helped you navigate your feelings and navigate your grief?
I had no idea how instrumental it would be to my healing because I began by writing to Christopher 21 days after he died. And it was born of my yearning to connect and my questions about where he'd gone. And I wanted to share with him everything that I was experiencing in terms of my missing. And I also, because as a mother, I'd always been driven by a desire to make sure my love landed, that my children felt the love of their mother in a way that I hadn't always felt it from one of my parents. And so I really was very motivated to do that. And so that's what the writing began as, was just sort of loving expressions and an inside look at what I was feeling in terms of my sadness.
Do you feel like Christopher? I know I wrote a book and I felt like he was writing it. Did you get that sense?
Honestly, I know my husband has spoken to this, and he more directly channels Christopher in this way. But I feel like I've always loved this particular quote that was that Helen Keller wrote. And it's this idea that all that we love deeply becomes a part of us. I gravitated to that particular quote even before Christopher passed. And I feel like I want to embody him, that he becomes sort of a source of light and strength for me, and that his absolutely, he was the two of us together were writing his story and mine.
Yes, oh, of course. And this is always a big topic because I'm a caring listener and I talk to so many parents. And regardless of how our children passed, I think as parents, uh, we feel guilty, at least in the beginning, because we felt that we didn't. I mean, my son passed in a motorcycle accident. It was 100% somebody else's fault, but I felt horrible. Why did I let him ride the motorcycle? So, again, no matter what, and I tell people this, we always feel guilty, but there should be no guilt because I believe that we can't, there's no changing their, they have their soul contract. So how did you navigate the guilt? I mean, did you feel guilty? Please tell us a little bit about some of that and what you went through.
I felt extremely guilty. I think any parent probably does, but I think any griever does. And I was able to take a grief education certification course that helped me appreciate how inevitable grief is, whether, just as you described with your own son, whether, you know, it's logical or not. It's often an illogical kind of a grief that David Kessler's course helped me appreciate was related to the fact that we feel such acute powerlessness that we'd rather blame ourselves for, the fact that they're no longer with us than face that kind of, just what could I have done? And for me, it landed in several different places. It landed in the place where it would for every mother who thinks their job is to keep their child alive. And it also landed for me in that because Christopher was an addict, I had invested a lot of my heart and soul and energy into trying to prevent that outcome. Um, and we'd lived through a series of times where we thought we could lose him. But I think that where my grief landed the most acutely was around the way that he died in having gone up to this lake house, because he turned to me before he left our home, and oh, I'm going to get choked up. He asked me if, what should I do, Mom? What should I do? Should I go? And of course, should I go? I can go. I mean, he had so many friends. I can go into the city and um, go to the bars like I did just a few nights before and and survived that, which his mother was thrilled about. Um, or I can go up to this lake house with a bunch of guys. What do you think? And of course, at that time, I thought, oh, that sounds more benign. That sounds really safer. It sounds like a safer bet. And so I know that I said something like, "Oh, I think that would be great." And I later was talking to one of my brothers about the guilt around this, and he said, "Sally, your son never listened to anything you ever said. You just don't have that kind of power. You never, had it over him in particular. He wasn't going to ever do what you told him to do. So it's wasn't about that, of course, but that was something I had to wrestle with and reconcile.
Yes. So do you feel you've been able to forgive yourself and move past it? Because I always tell people, no guilt, no guilt. Our kids definitely don't want that for us.
No, I know that he wouldn't. I know that he would absolutely tell me to let go. And I have, and I had to do it. Um, I had to forgive myself in a formal way because of you know, being in recovery and having a spiritual practice. I actually stood at Christopher's grave and made a formal amends to him. And I also, for the first time, even being a member of my recovering community for a long time, for the first time, I actually made a point of forgiving myself. And so it took time to get to that. And um, I also have made peace because, as you said, and I think so many of the Shining Light parents here have such conviction around, is that I do believe that was Christopher's soul contract, that he was not meant to stay any longer than he did.
Right. And, you know, just like you said, he normally wouldn't ask you or listen to you, but isn't it kind of crazy that he asked you and you suggested the the path that you would think was be safer? Because again, I just believe it's all part of the journey. It was his exit point. So
Yes, and it was one of the things that he also came here to teach me. There were so many, and it's not just purely teach me, but when I do think about finding meaning in his passing, I recognize that there are these that we're all here to grow and evolve. And
mhm,
for me to appreciate where to place my power has been a really big lesson, to let go of fear and not have it drive me, and to be present with and thankfully a few years before Christopher did pass, I was working on this letting go of fear. And then when he passed, of course, it came back to bite me in terms of being traumatized and having to continue to do the work of letting go of it. But I believe that love it just supersedes that and is so much more important.
absolutely. And, you know, our kids, I always have said, are our greatest teachers. And, you know, having them transition is one of the hardest earth lessons. So from what Mark Pitstick always says is we must be very evolved to have agreed to this. But uh, we certainly have learned and grown, and I know I have. Now you are, as you had said, a recovering alcoholic. So why don't you explain a little bit about some of the challenges of navigating your child's addiction when you, of course, are a recovering alcoholic yourself? I'm sure that that had to be difficult at times because you knew how hard it, you know, but then at the same time, I think you could understand him, which may have scared you some. But do you want to talk about that some?
Yes, this thread of addiction in my life has been so powerful, and I chuckle about the fact that I am now a therapist specializing in addiction because when I actually educated myself to be specialized, I arrogantly thought that I'd already become specialized just through my personal experience. But I was the daughter of an alcoholic father. And I think that's where of some of the seedlings of fear about the power of addiction began because I often chased that relationship and my father couldn't be emotionally available by virtue of his own addiction. And so even before my husband Joe, who's here, and I talked about, oh, wait a minute, we're both in recovery. What do you think? If we have children, what are the odds that they'll develop addiction? And I thought to myself naively that we would just nurture them, and they would benefit from parents who were raising them sober. And we didn't appreciate then that genes can be a powerful force. However, when Christopher was diagnosed with attention deficit, when, maybe even before he began experimenting with alcohol and drugs, the writing was very much on the wall that he could be ripe for developing addiction. And so I was primed with fear in that way. And then, it's very interesting because that's where this really important lesson for me of letting go of fear, it's had such great opportunities to play out with each of my children in different ways, to recognize that if I'm trying to control or prevent or protect them from something, um, that makes it less possible to be present in love. And it actually, there were periods of time when Christopher withdrew from that, and so he'd gotten this wonderful chapter during which he was clean and sober, and we'd really deeply connected during that time period. And then he started to drink and drug afterwards, at which point that was when I was really challenged to say, you know what? This is his path. This is his life. These are his life lessons to learn. All I have to do is love him.
Mm-hmm.
And, since he passed, I just feel like I'm less auditory in terms of hearing him speak to me. So, but I do feel him basically sending different messages, one of which is that, love is the only thing that matters. And and I'm really grateful for that period of time when he was doing what most college kids will do. And
Exactly.
like it's sort of strange. Again, it's that irony of he had the best time. Those kids in college that he connected to, um, are such special beings, and we have been able to develop relationships with them that really helped save me early on, to be able to have like these, you know, young men to hug and to let some of that overflowing love land on.
Exactly, exactly. And addiction, unfortunately, is it's such a, I mean, there's so many parents in our group who their children have passed and they're not recovering alcoholics. It's just unfortunately a problem. And I think they chose to come here with that addiction, and again, for teaching. And I just really believe that everything is part of the plan. Everything is part of the plan. So you and your husband, Joe, have been married quite a while. I mean, I think you've been married, is it over 30 years or?
Honey, how long have we been married? 33 years, I think.
33. Okay.
33 wonderful years is what you meant to say.
33 wonderful years. Well, that good for you. I've been 35 for me, so we're close. But I was going to ask, husbands and wives, and we heal so different. We mourn and grieve so differently. I know Joe seemed to, for a man, seemed to, immediately connect with Chris, and he had so many amazing signs. And we talked a bunch at the conference a couple of years ago. Joe, did you, Sally, like immediately, and I know women are different because it took me a little while, but the signs that I got were so powerful. There's no denying them. Did you immediately get signs? If not, do you get them now? You've already answered that you really don't feel like you can hear your son, although I think when people talk about hearing, I think they don't realize it's not their actual voice. It's hearing them in their head. But you said you really don't hear him, but do you feel, how do you connect
I
to him?
actually do. I mean, I'm not,
what
yeah,
are
like
your signs?
I remember early on wanting to literally hear his voice. But I am such a feeler through and through that I have felt him. Um, and yet what I will do is absolutely credit my husband. First of all, I want to say we're pretty different in a number of ways and yet similar in other ways. And one of the things that we learned at the beginning of our grieving was what we shared was this immense, fierce, passionate adoration for our firstborn. And we were going to need to respect each other in grieving in our own different ways. My husband was immediately convinced that there is an afterlife. And I needed to come to that in a process of, you know, I didn't really, in terms of my own religious upbringing, I didn't, I sort of hoped there was a heaven, but I didn't really know. And so the fact that Joey immediately reached out to mediums and that we began to have an experience where we could have Christopher channeled, and the fact that Chris was so powerful in demonstrating through mediums and then otherwise through signs, made me a believer.
Oh, well, that's that's amazing. I'm glad Joe opened that door for you. I mean, again, I think that that's why you're together is all part of your learning. So since then, do you do anything to enhance that communication? I mean, do you do yoga, meditation, automatic writing? Just if you want to talk a little bit about that spiritual journey that now it took me a while too, because I didn't believe in anything when my son first passed away. I thought I was just not going to see him. It came on pretty quick because he came on so strong. But tell us about your spiritual journey.
It's been, I was so fortunate to have a spiritual foundation and to believe that there is a God, a higher power that I call God, and that um, I almost immediately felt as if um, Chris was, well, first of all, I felt as if God did not do this to punish me. I did wonder, and actually the first medium that we went to, I asked the question of, is it possible that my fear could have manifested this to happen? And she was very reassuring and said that you intuitively were being prepared, but you didn't make it happen. And that's when I began to learn more about soul contracts and things like that. But um, I felt like God was sad alongside me, and I then felt this really beautiful depth of connecting to a higher power with Christopher as my conduit. Because, to have faith in something unseen is challenging. And so I felt like Chris gave me this incredible gift of almost taking my hand to lead me in the direction of knowing that all is well. And again, this is a process of coming to believe and reassuring myself and looking to my son's spirit to help me be reassured and sort of restored to safety.
Yes, absolutely. And you're a therapist, and obviously both mother and therapist. Would you say that that helped helped you to move forward or hindered the process?
I actually think that it helped me because I was going to see a therapist. I believe in order to do my work, it's really important to be my best self. And and she was teaching me about self-compassion, and I was in turn telling my clients about being compassionate with themselves. And this was one of those opportunities to practice what I had begun to preach and offer myself a self compassion like never before. I've always been very hard on myself. I've pushed through, I've insisted on being strong in a traditional sense. And this was a time to throw that out the window and use my own grief as an invitation to be so gentle and kind to myself, to resource myself really well, to take time off work to make it be about me first. And um, it felt selfish at first because I tend to be caretaking, but I needed to I needed to put that oxygen mask on.
Absolutely. That's what they tell you in the plane. Take care of yourself first and then help others. I will say that once we put that oxygen mask on though, and we're moving forward, that helping others, then kind of turning around and pulling someone forward is one of the most healing things on this journey. It just is fulfilling. It's just so worth it. I tell new parents once they've kind of made that little shift, that if they could just reach out and call somebody, or um get together with friends and coffee and just share some beautiful insights that help them move forward, it really helps us to move forward ourselves.
Feels so critical to both be able to connect to our our children and to be able to connect to other people and to find purpose in it. And I feel especially fortunate that I'm already doing the work that I'm doing, but then I also do have clients who've lost children that end up in my client caseload, and um, it gives me extra satisfaction to be able to shine any light I can their way.
Absolutely. And then we feel like when we see our kids, they're going to be cheering us on, like, great job. That's what, you did what you're supposed to do. So that always keeps me moving forward and doing what I know that would make him proud. Now, family and friends tend to, you know, they start to fall back after, those that are not part of our journey. They start to they don't know what to say, and a lot of times they're afraid, they can't even imagine what you're going through. So what would you suggest to people to help support your friends? And I know that.
Yes, I do. It's funny because this is one area where I think my husband and I might have been a little bit different, but it's largely because I care more about what people think, and he's been so good about, um, you know, Sal, don't worry about what other people think of you. So in general, and then when this happened, I was I, I lost my train of thought. I think I was when this happened, I would be really hurt by people weren't who were made uncomfortable by the fact that I was a walking representation of their greatest fear. So when people, I'd go out to the grocery store and I could see literally someone look at me and then see their face change, and then they might try to go a different direction. That I'm very sensitive that way, and it felt alienating to me. And so what I would suggest, because, just in my own experience, it mattered, was for anybody who hasn't themselves lost a child, but will inevitably encounter a friend or a family member who has, that they end up just acknowledging that, just being willing to lean in and approach it, even to just dip in for a moment and then walk away, would be it would be preferable to me than the alternative.
Absolutely. I know I always say that. I would rather they mean well, and it's better that they acknowledge or say something versus just ignoring us, But as the years have gone by, I've also found that if we keep talking about our children and we're happy and we're living, then they're not afraid anymore to talk. And so even, they'll still talk about it because they're not uncomfortable because they feel like, well, you're not uncomfortable. So it helps to keep our children memory, because our children are alive, but it keeps their memory of when they were physically here alive. So getting on to the
Love
next
that. I love I
question.
hadn't even thought about that, Carol, that because I have noted that I developed some social anxiety early on because I didn't know how people were going, this uh, regrettably, because Christopher was one of four young men who died the same day, our community all knew about it. And so it was a public experience. And so not knowing how people were going to respond to me, and then sometimes feeling the pressure of wanting to take care of them, but not having the bandwidth to be able to do it in those moments, I I just didn't go out to the grocery store so much. Whereas my husband would say, I don't care what anybody does. If they acknowledge it, if they don't acknowledge it, I'll go get the groceries. So it was just that was how we did it. And now I am noting that the more I feel at peace in my own skin, and again, the when the fear is not as present about what I'm going to encounter, then people meet me with a different energy.
Exactly. And tell us about how you do honor Christopher, what things you do to keep his memory alive.
We want so much to make him proud, and as you described, and we want to embody his really wide open heart. And we support two organizations in his name, one of which is In Balance Ranch Academy, where he attended therapeutic boarding school. So get to um, we hold an annual, my husband really holds it, an annual golf outing to raise money so that scholarships for young men who are suffering from addiction can make it possible for them to undergo that treatment. And then we also support an organization that was close to Christopher's heart at his college, where he was initially studying to be a special education teacher. We help young adults with disabilities be able to perform on the stage with student mentors. And Christopher was a mentor um, for the boy whose parents direct the show several times a year. And so we make it possible for them to continue to do this.
Wow. See how many beautiful things come out of, some things that are just so earth shattering. I mean, there again, you're the name of that beautiful book, Reaching for Beautiful. So I would love, Sally, without giving away too much of your book, why don't you share a little bit about it, and give everybody that little bit of that tease to get them to order your book.
I would love to. It is set in the year and a half after Christopher passed. It is a reflection on his life, my life, trying to make meaning of everything, give this inside look at my love for him. And he really has become my source. Here's one excerpt. Actually, I think I'm going to do an excerpt on maternal grief. This is just a little bit from my book. It is, I walk out further to discover a dead baby bird that's fallen to the ground, and its mama, sitting perched in the walnut tree overhead, continues to call for it, yearning for it to wake up. This mama bird and my fellow bereaved mothers carry an emptiness that is so gaping it takes over. The pain is so great, I ask myself how it's possible that so many of us could be living with it. It is simply unfathomable. The mama bird sounds her alarm, and I am sobbing with all of the mothers who've withstood the suffering and death of their babies from physical illness, the mothers who felt the despair of losing their sons and daughters to the devastation of suicide, the increasing masses of mothers whose children have been taken by the opioid epidemic, by murder or accident, and any and all of the other ways mothers could lose their children that I have failed to include. I ache for us all. I also know that we're able to transcend this ache and that our children want us to touch into moments of joy and reach for beautiful.
Absolutely. They definitely want us to be happy. And if we're here, we want to be happy. I mean, that's how I feel if I'm going to, while I'm here, because life goes so quickly. I know you said it was 9 years for you. It's about to be 10. And it is crazy how quickly the years go by. And it's a blink of an eye. And we just need to enjoy these moments knowing that, our kids are there with us the whole time. And then before we know it, we're all back together. So
It's true. As soon as I discovered that I could connect even better with Christopher when I was choosing to look for joy and moving through and up into the sunlight, that really made an energetic shift for me.
oh, definitely. When we raise that vibration, that's why, they talk about and yoga's not for everybody, but yoga or meditation or just taking a walk. I mean, this morning it was just the most beautiful morning. And I just started walking. I just started walking around my neighborhood and you could smell the orange blossoms and the word that make my husband sneeze to death, but I love them. But it's just, it feels good and it lifts you up. And then I feel like when my vibration is up and when I'm feeling good, and I've been able to do this again, because I've been on this journey for a while, I just feel Tyler more. I hear him, I'm connected to him just constantly. So, well, if anybody, I'm going to see if you have any final words, if there's any question while Sally's giving us her final words, type them in the chat. Otherwise, Sally, what would you say to these parents on here?
I would just suggest that you all love yourselves so affectionately and that you let go of any fear and that you as open as you can to the presence of your beautiful children and may you feel them close.
Thank you for that. And again, is your book on Amazon?
My book is on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. You can go to my website and order it wherever you will. It actually comes out tomorrow. So very exciting.
So exciting. Well, best of luck.
Well,
Again, Reaching for Beautiful, a memoir of loving and losing a wild child.
And before we leave, if we're starting to close up, I would love to just have Joe say some words too. And I know that you weren't planning on speaking today, but it's always so wonderful to have you on here. You've written 2 books yourself, and again, your journeys are very different. Sally's as opposed to Joe's, and it's interesting to me that frequently it's the moms who I guess, start on that spiritual journey quicker than the dads do. It seems like it was the opposite for you, but it's worked perfectly because both of you are healing and you're helping each other. But do you have anything to say about the book or about Sally?
Oh, shucks, Elizabeth, I don't like to speak in public very often. Um, but yes, I do. A couple of things
Yes, you do.
I would love to say is, first of all, I want couples, parents to respect each other's path and their grief path. Sally's was to slow down, unplug, fold into herself. Mine was to keep keep the cycle moving, try to find out what's next. But what happened is our monster love for our son, kept us connected so deeply when a lot of parents aren't able to survive this, as you know. Sally actually met the medium before I did when she went and saw Rebecca Rosen in Denver with the woman who's going to this group knows, Jen Weigel, who she met at Rebecca Rosen's in December in Denver after Christopher transitioned. It was our first exposure to him coming through, and that really helped kick things off for me. Sally was so disciplined. She started this book, started with love letters to Christopher when he was first born. And then she was so disciplined, and she's a perfectionist. My book is conversational. It's like you and I sitting down, Elizabeth, having a cup of coffee or tea and discussing our love for our children and these amazing events that have happened. Hers it's just so beautifully written, and it goes right to the heart. I couldn't be prouder of her from the honesty of speaking of trying to control Christopher, which we couldn't do, to the love that we both share. And today we were out on the deck and she pointed up and there was a hawk circling, and she said, "There's my sign." He sends me cardinals, he sends her hawks, and I think he's extremely, I know from channel a couple nights ago, he's so extremely proud of the journey that Sally has taken and how far she's come. So anybody in the Chicago area, we're having a book signing Friday at Winnetka Community Center. You're all welcome. I'd love to see you all there. And I just can't tell you, I've never been prouder or more in love with my wife than I am at this very moment. And I love all of you. So thanks.
Oh my goodness, that's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to say. Thank you so much, Joe. And yes, we love Joe. We are so happy to have you on here as well, Sally. Beautiful book. It is just so, the style of writing is just so beautiful. And I also love Joe's, but they're very different. And anyway, Carol, I want to pass it over to you, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to have Joe say
Yes.
something here.
Absolutely. I thank you so much. And thank you, Joe, and thank you, Sally. And we can ask everyone to unmute if they wanted to. We always ask them to unmute so they can say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sal. We have pizza coming.
Ooh,
Ah,
party at their house.
I'll join.
Thanks, Sally and Joe.
Have a wonderful
Thank
evening,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks so
Love you
much,
guys.
Carol and Lynn and
Thank you.
Joe.
Great job,
I
Carol.
love you
Bye,
all.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.